Hi everyone and welcome to another Gaffer and Gear. Well, on the way to set this morning, my shoot got cancelled. So it's given me a bit of time to do an episode. So my apologies that I haven't been doing episodes recently. I've just been too busy. All right, so a lot of people ask me for advice. A lot of young people starting out say, Andrew, what advice can you pass on to someone young who's starting out? Now, I don't want to give any of my original sort of advice, because I've almost gone bankrupt twice in the time that I've been running this business. So I'm not the person to come to for business advice. But what I will do in this video is pass on to you the best advice that people ever gave me in my career. All right, so this first bit of advice was given to me by an old grip, and it's the best advice I ever got when I was starting out. And it's still advice that I go by today. And it's to do with how much you charge. So we're working on the assumption you've been in the industry for 2 or 3 years now. You've done your time doing working for free on student films and things like that and working on the weekends. You've got some skill now. You're starting to get paid jobs and you just can't figure out how much to charge. So here's the advice I was given. If everybody says yes to your rate, then you're too cheap. If everybody says no to your rate, then obviously you're too expensive. So the advice I was given is you want 20 to 25% of people to say no to your rate and the other 75% to say yes. That'll put you in a good position. So here's my personal experience with this. This is what I found, because when I was about 3 to 4 years into my career, I was trying to get every single job, everything. And I was working myself into the ground. Now, once I applied this logic, this is what I found. The extra money I was making from that 75% of people who said yes, more than made up for the money I was losing by not taking the jobs from the 20% of people who said no. So I was earning the same amount of money, but working my body less hard. So that was fantastic. Now, here's the next thing I found. That bottom 20 to 25% who say no, you are never, ever, ever going to build up a long-term working relationship with that production company or that producer. And here's why. They are not hiring you because you are skilled at what you do. They are not hiring you because you've got the best equipment. They're not hiring you because your equipment is reliable. They are hiring you for one reason only, and because that is you are cheap. Now, as soon as somebody comes along cheaper than you, they're going to flick you off. So you're not building a relationship with them. Here's the next thing that happens. Sooner or later, you're not going to be available for a job and they're going to hire somebody else. Now, if that person comes in at the same rate as you, what tends to happen is they just use them from now on because they were never interested in building a relationship with you. They were just hiring you because you were cheap. Now, the other thing I found is that bottom 20 to 25% of clients that I got rid of when I took this advice, those people were about 50% of my hassle. They were about 50% of my problems. So life became a lot easier once I'd gotten rid of them. All right, the second best advice I was ever given in this industry was how much effort and care you put into the shot that you're working on. Now, bear in mind when I tell you this advice I was given that I work on smaller productions. So I'm always in close proximity to the director. All right, so here's the advice. You care about the shot you're working on as much as the director. No more and no less. All right, so it might seem like strange advice if you're young. If you're young, you're probably thinking, I'll just put 100% effort into everything I do and that will impress everybody and they'll hire me again. Well, here's the problem. Let's say we're running out of time. The sun's going to go down. We're not going to have enough sunlight, or the person we're filming has to go somewhere and we just don't have the time to finesse it and give it the amount of love and care that we would give it normally, okay? Now, if you're caring about it more than the director is, then you're probably the person who is slowing the shoot down and getting us behind schedule, all right? So that's why I got sacked off a job once, because I was caring too much, all right? So you care about the shot that you're working on as much as the director, no more and no less. Now, here's my personal add-on to that. There is one exception to this, okay? And that exception is, and this applies to the director and also applies to your head of department. So in my case, it might apply to a director of photography. And that is if you know them really well. Okay, you've had a long-term relationship with them in the business and you can see that something's not right with them. They're just not on their A game today. Maybe something in their personal life is distracting them. Maybe their wife's ill. Maybe they've got cancer. Maybe their child's sick and they're just not bringing their A game. In that case, if you have a very good personal relationship with them and you know what they normally do, in that case, you carry them, okay? You put the effort in that they would normally put into it, but you do it discreetly, okay? You don't make a scene about it, you just do it on the quiet, okay? And here's what will happen. Usually 3 to 6 months later, you'll get a phone call from them saying, thank you very much for carrying me over the last 2 or 3 months because my wife had cancer or whatever. The next good advice I was given was never let how much money you're being paid determine how much effort you put into the job. Now, for example, how much money you're getting paid could determine what equipment you bring, but don't let it determine how much effort you put in. And here's why. You never know where your next job is coming from. So for example, if you're on a shoot and you're getting paid half of your normal rate and you only put half of the effort in, people on set might not know that. They might be looking at you thinking you don't put a lot of effort in, and if your name comes up in a production meeting, they might not recommend you. All right, the next bit of advice I was given to me by a cinematographer after I had a very heated exchange with a producer. And here's the advice they gave me. Give reasons, not excuses. Now, that's very deep and meaningful, sound of one hand clapping, all that sort of stuff. What does that even mean? So it was explained to me. An excuse tends to deflect blame, okay? Tends to try and put the blame on somebody else, all right? Or it's very, very blunt. Reasons try to educate so that this doesn't happen again on the next job, or it doesn't happen again tomorrow, or they completely comprehend why you wanted that assistant with skills as opposed to somebody who could just carry heavy stuff, or why you asked for that generator instead of the one that they gave you, okay? So give reasons, not excuses. Now, the next bit of advice I actually got on my very first paid crew job. So I was running cables from the cameras to the mixing desk for a live mix of a concert. And in the audience was Jack Deaconkamp, who was used to be the chief cameraman at Channel 7. So a few of the guys pointed him out to me because it was my first job. They said, why don't you go and ask Jack for some advice? Because, you know, he's retired, he's just finished his career. So I went up to Jack and introduced myself and said, look, do you have any advice for somebody starting out? And he said, yep, be nice to everybody on the way up because you meet them again on the way back down. That was it, that was his advice. But being 18, I sort of had this weird idea of how my career would go. So I didn't understand his advice. So I thought my career would go something like this. So maybe by age 30, I would, you know, get my first Academy Award nomination, and maybe by 40, I'd be thanking my supermodel wife when I get presented and give my a speech at the Oscars. And I might do some work with Steven Spielberg at about age 50, and then start winding down my career. Maybe instead of working on feature films, I'll just do TV commercials for like Mercedes or Ferrari or something like that, and wind my career down to age 65. And I thought Jack's advice meant that be nice to people here in your career because you're going to work with them again back here, and you might work with people here, and when you're winding down your career you might work with them back here. But this is how my career sort of has gone so far, and this isn't completely to scale. Okay, so loads of ups and downs. Now, if I was really nasty to people here on the way up, and I met them again back here on the way down, my career would have ended at that point. The next bit of advice came from my dad, and he said, why don't you find out why people hire you? Why do your clients hire you? And at this point, I wanted to be a cinematographer. You know, I was working as a cameraman. I was operating Betacam SP video cameras. I wanted to be a cinematographer. And, I asked people why they hire me, and they pretty much all told me the same thing. Some of them were really honest. They said, Andrew, your camera work is absolute shit, but you're fantastic at lighting. Maybe you should give up on this camera work thing because you're really crap at it and concentrate on lighting because you're really good at that. So that was, devastating for me to hear at the time, but it was the best thing I ever did, was asking people why they hire me, finding out what my strength is, what my point of difference is from the other people. The next good advice I was given fairly early on in my career was never criticize anyone else's work on set, either directly or indirectly. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're watching a TV show last night and you thought it was absolute crap. Don't go on set and say that, because you don't know who in the crew worked on that show. For example, the director on the TV commercial you're working on today might have been the director of that TV show last year. So you've got to be really careful of what you say on set about other people's work. Now, the next bit of advice wasn't given to me. It was given to a camera operator by a director of photography, and I was just listening in. And fantastic advice. So this camera operator wanted to know when he should consider trying to make the step up to director of photography. And here's the advice he got. The director of photography said, look, instead of being on set and watching how I light it and how I position the cameras, what you should do is get onto the location 5 minutes before me and figure out where you would put the cameras and where you would put the lights. Now, if my ideas are always better than yours, then you're not ready. Now, here's the next thing. If your ideas are as good as mine, you're still not ready, because most likely you're just copying what I do. Now, if you get on set and you're making decisions on where to put the lights and where to put the cameras, and your choices are better than mine, then you're showing original thought and you're ready to consider it. Now, the next bit of advice was given to me by a cinematographer after I complained about the lack of resources that we had on a low budget production. And he made a really, really valid point. He said to me, Andrew, if they could afford all of that equipment, they could probably afford a better gaffer and a better director of photography. So neither of us would have the opportunity to be here today making the money that we're making, and we wouldn't have the opportunity to prove ourselves worthy of being on the next job when they've got a better budget. Now, that's all the best advice that people gave me in my career. Now, I just want to give you some advice that I wish somebody had given me 20 years ago. And that is that this industry, at least in Australia, is a real honey trap for people who are young. So what I mean by that is, if you're young, the amount of money you can earn in this industry can be 2, sometimes 3 times more money than your friends are earning at the same age if they're working in retail or hospitality or something like that. So you have this concept in the back of your mind, or at least I did, that when I was younger, that look at how much money I'm earning now. How much more money am I going to earn in 20 years' time when I've got 20 years more experience? So this is approximately how much more money you're going to earn with 20 years more experience. 0, okay? You can hit your top pay grade at about 27, 28 years of age in this business. And it is a fantastic amount of money when you're single. So something you need to consider, and again, this is advice I wish someone gave me when I was younger, is if you are hitting your top pay grade, you need to do the math on it. You need to look at it and go, well, can I survive off this money if I have to do adult things? Because being an adult creeps up on you real quick. You know, you might have to have a mortgage one day. You might want to have a child one day. You might be married one day. You know, you got to look at all those things and go, right, can I do that on this income? All right, is that a possibility? And something you really need to consider, where I've almost lost this house, is at some point in a serious relationship, whether you're married or in a long-term relationship, in some point in that relationship, it's almost a certain guarantee that you will be living off one income. There are lots of reasons that your partner can lose their income. Maybe they just get sick and they can't work. So you need to sort of look at the money that you can bring in and say, can I get this to work? Okay. And if you can't, start thinking about how you're going to do it. If you want to really be in this business, if it's what you're passionate about and you're like me, you're too stupid to go and get another job, you just love this too much, you need to start thinking about how you can get the math to work now. You don't want to start thinking about it in 20 years' time when it's too late. All right, otherwise you have all these stresses. Okay, so for me, the answer was setting up a second lighting van so I can have two vans working, renting equipment out. Okay, those things I hate doing, but they enabled me to stay in this business and keep doing the job I love. So that's the thing. It's a real honey trap when you're young because you earn a lot of money, but that doesn't exponentially keep going up the older that you get.